welcome back everybody to our show, Radio Rocketman, back from another glorious week with so much news, so many things happening on the geopolitical arena, and here to break it down all with me is my co-host, George. How are you, George? Welcome.
Hola, 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 señor Luigi. Es su casa, es mi casa. How are you, Luigi? How are you this fight week?
Well, very well, very well. I'm very happy that we have a fantastic show for everybody today.
We have too many news to get through, so we might not get through all of them, but we promise to get through the important ones at least.
Yeah, so
It's
let's
a
do
promise you can take
to the
heaven.
bank. No,
I was going to
bank.
say, but fuck banks. To heaven, people.
Yeah.
To heaven.
Religion, meh.
My heaven.
George's heaven.
To
His
atheist
own
heaven.
personal heaven.
Atheist heaven.
Definitely atheist heaven.
Yes.
Definitely does not consist of 72 virgins.
No. Nobody's a virgin in my heaven.
All right, so
let's start
we've
live.
got.
Okay, we're gonna go
let-
through. Sorry, Luigi. Yeah, if you wanna.
I was gonna do a mini teaser of what we have ahead for everybody. We have a big case in the International Court of Justice.
If
The US
anyone knows anything about anything happening in the news, they've probably at the least have heard that Israel has been taken to the Hague, Luigi.
The Hague.
Where all good warring nations go. Where all good warring. You gotta be a respectable war criminal if you end up at the Hague, right?
Yeah, well,
It's a higher bar of
it's a
criminality.
misfortune and a tragedy that Henry Kissinger avoided that trial for all of his life.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone has rightly gone to the Hague. Yes.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
But
some
we
have.
also have the US election process finally getting
Oof.
started with the new year.
Yes.
So there's a lot to cover.
Beautiful Iowa. Beautiful Iowa.
Snowy Iowa.
By the way, I mean, yeah, we'll get to that. But I love that the Democrats just snapped it. We're like, fuck Iowa. We're gonna do South Carolina because they know Joe.
We're gonna get to that in a second. But first, we have our favorite billionaire.
Definitely our favorite. As long as he's there, as he's got the most, Luigi, I think he will be our favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
a stable genius, world's largest man, bringer of rockets, cars that occasionally
you know it, people.
The serial entrepreneur and
driverless cars that can't even drive themselves. You know it.
Yeah,
He's a legend, a living motherfucking legend that still walks among us. Soon will be hovering, I think. I heard on X.
We're gonna curve his face onto Mount Rushmore
easily. I mean, if anybody's disgusting looking face has to be etched there, it's gotta be the Elon's. It's gotta be
like looking like he's really trying to fart, like
looking like a Confucian genius, just ruminating on the secrets of the motherfucking cosmos. Tell us the news.
The top business mind of this planet,
generation, millennia, all generations,
in all of history, in every universe, in all the
singularities,
in all the multiverses, all the timelines, whatever. So yeah. His
bombed Twitter. He's bombed it.
His acquisition of X, not a porn website, but it sounds like one. Let's admit it. His acquisition of Twitter has how do we call it?
Has not borne fruit, Luigi.
Yeah,
has
so
not borne the right fruit. So
if in investing the value of what you buy goes up, this would be like reverse investing because the value of what he bought kind of went to shit. So let's be specific. Twitter recently got valued by Fidelity. Fidelity is one of the biggest funds on planet Earth, similar to BlackRock and so on. They're the ones that basically own everything for their shareholders. Now, Fidelity, as it were, recently valued Twitter, and they found that Twitter has lost about 70% of its value since the great entrepreneur has taken over. And they also found some different reports. I was checking, George. You're gonna love this. Remember last month where he basically told advertisers to go fuck themselves?
Yeah, that was great.
That was great. It turns out that took Twitter down another 10%, give or
No
take.
way. No way.
Nobody
No
could have seen it.
fucking way. Nobody. Nobody. Not even Elon, probably.
So yeah, I'm sure if you ask Elon, he's gonna be like, "Oh, but free speech is worth protecting." But I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, that was a shitty move that he's never gonna admit to. So our galactic overlord is not a genius, it
Who
turns
has
out.
definitely, but who has gone increasingly far right these days. He's trying to build an incel army. You can't fucking dissuade me from that notion. That's what he's doing. He knows that society has a high chance of collapsing, and this is my time to build my army of far right troglodytes who worship my Tesla vehicles.
Wow. When
Wow.
you've got $100 billion, what do you need,
I mean, yeah.
an
I
incel
mean,
army for? You can buy an actual private army and still have like 90 billion left over.
he probably has private security, 100%. A private army, I haven't heard anything.
I mean, dude, I mean, if a jet fighter, if a military plane costs 50 to 100 million, I mean, what can you buy with 100 million? I mean,
He bought X, he bought
he
Twitter,
bought X, he bought Twitter like it was peanuts, and yeah, it's been
and
going well.
ruined it, and ruined it, and ruined it. I mean,
Yeah,
the story, it's the classic story.
yeah.
It's a
So.
classic. Boy genius born in a Zambian emerald mine. Just does great things, sort of, yeah, sort of is behind PayPal. No,
Who,
just invested in it, whatever. The guy who
yeah,
actually made it through him a bone. And then
who, by the way,
created
is from
Teslas, but not really. It's another guy who created them. He invested in it again. And
bringer of
now,
rockets,
100%.
conqueror of Mars, protector of the
Conqueror
realm.
hasn't gone there, but he will. He
He
will.
will, he will.
He will.
The
He
first
will.
statue of Mars is gonna be
Well,
Elon's face.
what was it? When G.R.R. Martin writes the next one, that's when Elon gets to Mars. That's what I
Wow, so
think.
never, never is the answer to that. But okay, okay.
No, no, it's coming. It's
Maybe
coming.
it's coming, it's coming. There's gonna be
Coming.
many of them. Okay, so speaking of Elon, who is born in South Africa, what has South Africa done
Wow.
lately, George?
I am in awe by your
That's a good
segue,
segue.
Luigi.
Yeah, that's a good segue. You have to admit.
That
Yeah.
is why you get the big bucks, Luigi. That's why you get.
Except I don't. We are working on starvation wages, folks. So please go to YouTube and like and subscribe. Seriously, for the viewers that we have, we're a young channel. We could really use your support. Please do subscribe to us. It really makes the algorithm. It helps the algorithm.
The great algorithm.
So yeah, speaking of South Africa, George, please fill us in on what has been happening lately.
South Africa has taken Israel itself to court at The Hague, seeking an interim decision. Let me just find it. A provisional or interim measure, meaning that 17 judges, including one from inside, will seek to reach it as soon as possible. I mean, what they have asked is South Africa to decide whether there's a possibility that Israel is committing genocide,
Mhm.
basically.
And
They only need to decide whether at least some of the alleged acts are capable of falling within the provisions of the 1948 Genocide Convention enacted in the wake of the mass murder of Jews in the Holocaust, and not that Israel's conduct amounts to a genocide. That will take part in a trial afterwards. That will take years. The
okay, so
convention defines, yeah, go on,
So
Luigi.
the way I'm understanding this is that they have to examine whether something could be considered genocide, but genocide is a very specific word, right? We are not talking about war crimes. We are not talking about crimes against humanity. We are talking specifically about genocide.
Acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. I
Yeah.
mean, I watched a lot of the footage of the trial,
So yeah. So,
and I found the arguments made to be very robust by South Africa. It was a very well thought out argumentation. They included, of course, they included all the statements by all the genocidal statements by Israeli officials, and beyond that, I remember explicitly the way they kept tying it to precedent with previous provisional decisions and measures taken, and
by this court.
by the
Mhm.
International Court of Justice, yeah, decisions with Russia, with Ukraine, with Armenia, and Azerbaijan, with Nicaragua.
Yugoslavia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the Rohingya Muslims, there's a lot of it. And by basing this, continually calling back to that president, they kept arguing, there is no possibility they can argue that this is not happening when what is happening now is much worse than what you have already declared potential genocide in previous cases. So I thought that it was a very robust, very well made argumentation by South Africa. Do you want to talk about South Africa first and their
Of
argument
course.
and the argument put forward by them before we go
Yeah.
on Israel defense
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Israel
of course. So
defense?
look, their argument was exactly what everyone that has been following this conflict has been saying for months now, that the situation, first of all, that there is no, so Israel is saying, I'm not targeting civilians, but when there is zero consideration about civilian casualties and civilian
When so many have
collateral
died,
fire,
yeah.
exactly, it becomes a very difficult position to argue. So South Africa, you know, it was a very measured approach. They didn't try to, it wasn't extravagant, right? They didn't try to
Yes,
shock the audience. They didn't try
yes.
to show videos of people being amputated and so on.
They
They just
avoided
talked,
any footage of that, as
yeah,
far as I have seen.
precisely. And look, their argument was very simple. Such a very high percentage of children has died. There's no medical care left. There's no medicine. Women are having to give birth with no anesthesia. There's no food left. Most of Gaza is at the risk of, most Gazans are at the risk of starvation at this point. There's inadequate water. Children haven't gone to school for 3 months now. Half of the buildings are destroyed. There's no infrastructure. The place is basically an unlivable hellhole at
A
this
ruin.
point.
Yeah.
A ruin, yeah. So that was the basic argument that
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
South Africa has done.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, Luigi. So, and by tying all that to previous times where the court already ruled in favor of those arguments for actual less devastation occurring, I think it was a pretty tight case that they
Yeah.
presented.
And it was so good because, okay, so the way I understand this is that the South African lawyers did not have access to Israel's
No, they
defense
did not. They did
beforehand.
not.
So they tried
Yes.
to cover all bases. And one of their main arguments was that, saying I'm defending myself only goes that far, right? At some point, it's, when you're massacring civilians in large numbers, it goes way past, any
Reasonable
dimension
right
of,
of
yeah,
defense.
of
Yeah.
exactly. So that was the main argument that they were making. And the way that the Israeli lawyers countered most of that was to say that, yeah, we are defending ourselves, that, we've gone out of our way to protect civilians, for example, by, you remember that Hunger Games map that we showed in a previous episode? So
Yeah, yeah.
basically,
But before we get there, Lee,
Mhm. Yeah,
should we note
of course, of course.
the mad lad, the previous UK Labour Party
Mad
leader,
Dog.
Jeremiah motherfucking Corbyn was there.
Jeremy, I fight for human rights, Corbyn.
I mean, he was there for South Africa, and now he's here for Palestine with South Africa. It's nice. It's not proving that you can take the man out of the Labour Party, but you cannot take the Labour Party out of the man.
Yeah, by the way, I was watching some interviews of his, and he was basically saying, "We used to march against South African apartheid.
Yeah, he
It
did.
was it wasn't popular back then,
Yeah.
but history has shown that we were on the right side of history." And he's saying, this is the exact same situation, and I very much agree with him.
And
I
he
mean,
has marched again, people. Cast out by Sir Keir, called an anti-Semite one too many times. Now he's there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. At least now he's owning up to it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so.
Should we know the yeah, go on, do you want to say
No,
something?
no, no. I was gonna say something. No, please, you go, please.
Should we know that the court's rulings are final and have no ability to be appealed, cannot be
Hmm.
appealed, but it has no enforcement powers, and the countries do not always follow the court's verdicts. Obviously, I mean, we mentioned Russia. The International Court of Justice ordered Russia to stop its invasion of Ukraine, for example. That hasn't stopped. But you can speculate. I mean, Israel has already decided to defend itself. That lends more legitimacy, you have to argue, to the procedure happening now. So I mean, and France, I remember France has come out saying that they will abide by whatever
Mhm.
it rules. So I mean, effectively, when we say the international community, I mean, the UN General Assembly, but that has no enforcement power. So it all leads to the UN Security Council,
To
to the
fuck
Security
all.
Council.
It all leads to fuck all because it's gonna get vetoed by the United
I
States
mean, you
or
can't
the
imagine
United
Jack.
Kingdom.
You can't imagine Jack at this point going that far.
So,
But
so
but I still think there will be repercussions if it rules against Israel provisionally. And just to say, and orders it. I mean, what South Africa is calling for, the judges, calling on the judges to order an immediate ceasefire,
okay,
basically.
let me rephrase that. If if the International Court of Justice finds that Israel is in fact committing genocide, or that it can be considered
Yeah,
genocide,
yeah,
or if
potentially committing an act of genocide.
under international law, Israel being a signature to the
Yes,
to the treaty that establishes the
the
International Court of
convention
Justice,
on the
the convention, Israel being a signature theoretically has to obey that ruling. And beyond that, the rest of the signatures, the other 170-ish countries that have signed that convention, are also obligated to take action
to
to stop,
proactively act, yeah,
to prevent further
harm happening, to
yeah,
prevent further
further
genocide,
genocide,
to stop,
essentially.
yeah, and proactively, 100%.
But as George mentioned, that has to be done through the UN, and almost certainly the United States is going to say something like, we don't really agree with that ruling. We're going to block it in the Security Council, and nothing really happens. Now, nothing really happens. No resolution is going to pass the Security Council of the UN. But as that article also points out, it would be a huge step in
It would be
increasing
historic.
political pressure on
It would
Israel
be
to
historic, people. It would be
yeah.
historic. Historic. Sorry, Luigi.
At this point, nobody's exerting pressure on Israel to go for a ceasefire. There's no motivation for Israel to do that because the international community has just been apathetic about this whole situation. Now, a ruling from the International Court of Justice would change that a little bit, at least for the countries that were kind of neutral.
I mean,
But
it might not change the United States response, but what about
not the United
Europe's?
States.
What about
That's what I'm saying.
Europe's? And Europe
More
trades a
neutral.
lot
Yeah.
with Israel, possibly the biggest trading partner, the EU. What about
Yeah. Yeah.
that? So this is going to be historic and it's going to change. Obviously, I mean, we want change to happen faster, but I mean, it's going to be very, but if they rule in favor of this, Jesus Christ, I mean, a little bit of my faith in humanity will possibly be restored.
I really hope that. Like, if it's gonna take weeks, maybe months until we get to a proper decision, and let's hope the fighting is gonna be over before then. But yeah, finding Israel guilty for genocide would be a faith in humanity restored kind of moment. Now, is that gonna happen? Well, there's a lot of people arguing, a lot of credible people arguing that if you look at the judges who are going to make this decision, there are basically 15 judges from various countries.
Yes.
Uh, there's a political dimension to the court as well, right? So
There always
shine,
is. There
of
always
course,
is.
especially international
Yeah.
courts. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But we have to for now to tentatively put our faith in them.
Yeah, by the way, just to say
Probably
that
bites us in the ass, whatever.
the defense that the Israeli lawyers mounted,
You
uh,
started talking about it,
as,
Luigi. We
as
were talking about we warned with over 70,000 phone calls, 11 billion text messages, 14 gazillion voice. We knocked, Luigi. We knocked.
yeah,
And
okay,
basically,
okay.
it's hummus. It's hummus.
For the audience as well. Israel claims, and they probably do it, that they notify civilians before they bomb an area. So they send them
But yeah, 100%.
either
But
text.
they keep bombing every area. That's another issue. Yeah, yeah,
Well.
yeah.
They either notify them through text messages, or they give them a call, or they drop leaflets through on the area. The problem with that being, so let's say I get a text message, or somebody from the Israeli Defense Forces tries to call me that they're gonna bomb my building. Well, guess what? There's no phones available in Gaza. Like telecommunications are down. So how exactly are you gonna tell that person who doesn't have a functional phone that they're about to be bombed? And even if you did, as we covered with George in previous episodes, having a map that a regular person has to run through. I mean, let's say you are in one part of Gaza when they tell you, you have to move 30 kilometers in the next 2 hours or you're going to get bombed, guess what? You don't have a car. Even if you did have a car, you don't have fuel. So you basically have to pick up your life and live on foot most of the times just so just so you don't die. And a lot of times you're gonna be bombed where you go anyway, as George just pointed out. So it's a very hollow defense. It's one of those things that you
Yes.
could you could argue that they're doing those warnings almost just to have a defense to be able to say, look, we tried to warn them. So
Sorry, Luigi.
yeah, yeah, please.
I thought that as with your, as you said, I thought that it was a weak defense, but not because it was weakly made in any sense, and it was very adequately made. But it's just you can't hide from the facts. I mean, you can obfuscate, you can equivocate, and they blamed Hamas a lot, let me tell you. But I mean, essentially, I mean, basically the argument is behind every motherfucking human being in Gaza lies a Hamas
Yeah,
operative,
yeah.
Luigi. And so, I mean, hummus is
Yeah, yeah,
everywhere,
yeah.
Luigi.
And
And I mean,
everybody has
we
been
killed
demonized. Everybody has been demonized to the
implicitly.
point
Yeah.
of that there's no innocent people in Gaza,
Yes, but
where
that is not stated.
almost half of the
Yeah.
population is children.
Yes, yes, yes. But I mean, it's never outright said. But yes, obviously implied because it's like Hamas is ruling over them. They sort of like it, and they're terrorists, and they're killing their young because they have no regard for human life.
Yeah, yeah.
And it feels rotten. It feels rotten because it's basically Ben Shapiro's argument. It's not amazing.
Yeah, and by
Which
the
we,
way, the best one of the best lines I've heard in recent days is that the worst thing that could happen to Hamas is lasting peace
oh yeah,
because
of
then
course.
the conditions for them being there no longer exist. I will be yeah,
But then,
we're not gonna get
Luigi,
there.
the conditions for Bibi to be there no longer exist as well.
Precisely,
Which
precisely,
is the
George.
far more pertinent question, the far more
Precisely.
important aspect of solving this thing. But, and yeah, I mean, you can keep playing hummus, 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 but I mean, you've got 24,000 motherfuckers dead at this point, more than 1% of the population. So, I mean, it can only go so far when the facts paint such a stark picture, right?
Of course. Of
Well,
course,
I
and
mean,
I think it's plain for everyone to see. I think that Israel's defense, like you said, even though legally speaking, it was pretty okay.
it
It
was very well made, but it's
Yeah,
just the
the
facts.
lawyers
Just
the lawyers were professionals, but the material they were working with was
yes,
very weak. So
exactly.
yeah,
I mean, you can only go so far with it. And then they spend a lot of time. I mean, they obviously made the whole, we're Jewish, so we know what a genocide is. So don't accuse us of that. But
yeah, 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 yeah.
and they talked a lot about October 7th. And even when they talked about it, which was of course a genocidal act against them, no doubt about it. Although, and yes, I'm gonna go there, a more understandable genocidal act against them, because when it's an oppressed population acting out genocidically against the ones oppressing them, that feels more understandable than the opposite. Am I allowed to state that?
I don't really agree with that
You
because
can't really
you know,
condone, dude. But when the
yeah,
fucking
you,
when the
you,
when
you,
the
you,
when
you-
the when the slaves rebelled in fucking the United States, they killed fucking innocents. You know that, right? They
of
killed
course, man, of
babies.
course. Look,
It's
in
complicated.
innocent people die in every conflict around the planet. What we're discussing is the severity of this particular conflict with regards to civilian casualties being excessive, way too excessive. Yeah, I'm not gonna condone any genocidal act. Genocide
That
as
feels best. That feels best. Yes.
but like so the South African lawyers tried to get ahead of this, and they stated multiple times that regardless of the scale of the attack on October 7th, and regardless of whether it was homicidal, which probably was, that still is not an excuse for you to commit
There
genocide
is
attack.
basically, there is never an excuse to commit genocidal
Exactly,
acts.
exactly, exactly. And I mean that's such an obvious human truth, right?
And
There's
yeah,
nothing that gives you the moral
yes.
argument to slaughter innocent people in vast numbers. That's fucking insane.
You've convinced me. I was wrong on what I said before.
Well,
And the Israelis, just to know themselves, the lawyer, Baker, the purpose of relaying such details, he stated himself, was not to absolve Israel of its responsibility to comply with international law in its response, but because it was impossible to understand the armed conflict in Gaza without appreciating the nature of the threat Israelis face. And then they cherry picked, by the way. I mean, South Africa presented 8 pages. How many pages were there of quotes? And then they just cherry picked the ones that they could sort of fudge. And they were
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, by the way, this one, he also said that the IDF does everything to avoid harming the uninvolved. So I mean, he was like, dude, my man, we know. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, Trump does the same shit when he says peacefully and then talks about fucking fire and mortar. It's
I
the
agree.
same
Yeah,
shit.
yeah, it's a classic
It's a class.
technique.
It's a classic. I have to listen to my lawyer for this technique.
Yeah, and by the way, like when cabinet ministers are openly making genocidal, excuse me,
Yes, yes.
claims, it's very difficult to deny. Yeah, you could say they
And they
didn't really
did.
mean it, but
You see that exactly. That it's not a real argument.
I mean,
I mean,
even
they
even
then showed Hamas statements, Luigi. That
even
why weren't they rhetorical? It's not proper argumentation.
I'll agree. It's cherry picking, and I mean, I like there was a great line by the South African lawyers that no nation is ever going to admit it's doing genocide, and
Exactly.
I would argue like Israeli ministers have gone
Very
very
close.
far. Yeah,
Very
very close.
close.
Yeah,
And I think far. I mean,
not the entire government, to be fair, but at the end of the day, maybe those people are just the more vocal parts of the government.
yeah, I mean it's not an argument that behind the scenes Bibi actually keeps telling them to be, because South Africa also made this argument by showing some very harrowing footage, I remember, of a bunch of Israeli soldiers dancing. It was like a mitzvah, it was like a celebration, but what they were chanting was that they're gonna destroy the nation of Amalek and shit. So I mean,
Yeah.
South Africa perfectly showcased how these words are translated by the ordinary soldiers on the battlefield.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it
Yeah,
doesn't matter if you told your fucking general that you have to respect civilian populations. And by the way, even if you told your fucking general, it is pretty clear cut that civilian populations are not being respected by the amounts of fucking deaths of them we have. So,
yeah.
by the way, they also cast aspersions on that number because Hamas operated
Yeah,
hell.
yeah, yeah. The Hamas
But
operated health ministry. Yeah. By the way, a lot of independent, a lot of UN studies suggest that the number of people dying from the bombs is going to be relatively. If the situation continues, you're gonna see a lot more people than that dying of disease and starvation as things are today. So, but honestly, it can still get way
yeah,
worse.
and there must be about 100,000 killed and injured people at this point in
Yeah, yeah.
in in Gaza. And just to finish up on what is
Hmm.
happening at The Hague,
Hmm.
we've got Germany wants to intervene on behalf of Israel, and I just want to say that Germany should be expressly forbidden, should be the only country not allowed to intervene in cases of genocide. That's it.
I'll agree. I'll second
Yeah.
that one. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't give a shit what
German,
you wanna
yeah.
say, dude. We wrote the fucking thing because of you. Shut the fuck up. You're not allowed. Shut the fuck up. Go make cars.
Yeah, and honestly, like I still don't understand this. Yeah, Germany did genocide in the past, and we are still feeling so guilty about that. We are willing to condone something similar that's happening now. Like, how does
I
that
have no
logic
words
work?
for it. I have no words for it, Luigi. I don't want to say anything else because we're going to get fucking cancelled.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get cancelled anyway. But look, seriously, the German government's position has been extremely weak throughout all of this. It's basically been the American position. We see nothing wrong here. You can do whatever it is that you want to do. Nobody cares. We're not gonna say anything. That's been literally the position.
Yeah.
We're
So
yeah.
what I want to talk about I
Let's
mean,
talk about that
is
a
there an
little bit.
all-out war? Is there an all-out war happening in the Red
No,
Sea? What is happening?
no. Here's what's happening. So, some rebels in Yemen who are supported by Iran,
The
who are
Great
given
Houthis.
the Great Houthis, who Iran supplies arms to. They started hitting commercial ships with, missiles in some occasions in the Red Sea, which is very close to the Middle East, and that's an area where a lot of trade happens and where a lot of oil passes through, a lot of oil tankers pass through. So naturally, the Americans got a little bit annoyed, and obviously the Houthis are hitting commercial trading ships, right? So obviously a military was going to get involved, and they responded by bombing Yemen. Yeah, so they ended up bombing Yemen as a response to that, and it hasn't been too significant because they're striking military targets for the most part. By the way, look at that, Israel. Is that so difficult? Yeah.
Ostensibly, the Houthis have launched the attack to support Palestinians in the war in Gaza. Luigi, if the ICJ rules against Israel, does that make their attacks legitimate? Is this
Look, the attacks.
proactively attempting to stop genocide by any and all means at your disposal? So, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, except they were targeting commercial ships,
It's a
right?
bit of a haphazard attacking pattern, right? It's not exactly laser focused on
Yeah,
Israel.
but I mean, you lose any credibility you have as an organization or as anyone when you intentionally attack civilians. If you're a liberation movement and you're attacking military targets, that's one thing, right? But when you're attacking the civilian population or even trade, it's yeah, it's a little bit taboo even in warfare. So yeah, not a lot of love for the Houthis. But by the way, just as a little bit of background, Yemen has been a stage. Yemen has been a proxy war, a stage for the
How long now?
confrontation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And when we say Saudi Arabia, we mean Saudi Arabia supported by the US a little bit on that, and Iran on the other side. So Yemen is also the poorest country in the Arab world, we should note. So,
I mean, it
yeah,
was before what's happening in Gaza now. Yemen was the most impoverished and disaster-stricken place in the Middle East, at least.
yeah, that's a bad way to lose your top spot in misery by
Should
somebody else
we?
becoming way more miserable.
Should we
Yeah,
should we discuss? They've been assassinating left and right, right? I mean, we discussed one assassination, but the Israelis have been killing senior Hezbollah commanders everywhere in Lebanon at this point. And yeah, I mean, my only comment on that is they
but
should be
how
they should be careful if it comes back to bite them. This
are they?
degree of
Well, there's a lot of concern that this could escalate with Lebanon joining the war, to which that's a position I never really sympathized with because let's say some madness takes over Lebanon and they join the war. They surely know that it's total annihilation on the other side. There's zero chance you win that war, right? Especially with U.S. aircraft carriers in the region just waiting to support you. You have no chance. So why would you ever do that? Unless Israel takes this to the point where Lebanon has to, reply in force somehow.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I don't think, even the Hezbollah sort of regime in Lebanon. I don't even think those guys will want to go into a
And
full-blown war.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know whether even Israel itself is capable of waging a two-front war at this point against Hezbollah.
They are. I mean, it's a modern military, one of the most best equipped militaries.
Hezbollah is far better trained and equipped than Hamas in Gaza.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that obviously Hezbollah is the underdog in this conflict and does not want to have that conflict. But it's not a conflict that should happen. And Israel should not be pushing his lag as well.
Look, I try to think about this in simple terms. Like one side has an air force, for example. The other doesn't really. So it's not really a war when you don't have an air force. It's a slaughter, especially when you're neighbors.
Yeah, it's gonna be truly devastating for Lebanon. Again, by the way, they've had this war before.
But
Obviously, it's gonna be devastating for Lebanon, but it's not a war that will help Israel in the long run. It's gonna destroy every relation Israel wants to have in the Middle East.
and it's gonna make the region more unstable and less safe for Israel itself as well. But
Should we? What
yeah,
else? Oh. Yeah. Let's
let's
finish
keep.
up on this. Let's finish up on this. If there's anything else you wanna say, yeah.
That's pretty much it. I didn't see the strikes on Yemen coming, but again, I'm not too surprised, and I stand by my original assessment. Nobody really wants to escalate this much further. On the Arab side, you have to imagine. So
I
let's close
agree.
with that. Let's be hopeful that this doesn't escalate any further and that this is the worst it gets.
The White House has said that it's the right time for Israel to scale back its military offensive in the Gaza Strip, as Israeli leaders again vowed to press ahead with their offensive against Hamas. The comments expose the growing differences between the close allies on the 100th day of the war. It's not certain where this is going, right?
How do you mean that exactly?
I mean, I would venture a guess that Israel will be forced to abide by what the US wants it to do, but I'm not certain that they will.
Look, for a long time, the relationship has been that, the US, obviously, the US is a superpower. What the US
Obviously, there is no
says
doubt about it.
goes.
Yeah. The
But
US says duck, you fucking duck. There's no doubt
yeah,
about it.
yeah. I mean, any country in the world, give or take. But
Give or take a
it,
China or two.
yeah, or any Russia. But I mean, Israel has shown in recent months that that's not 100% true because if you're their closest ally, then you can get away with a slap on the wrist where when somebody else would have gotten away with,
Would have gotten
a
sanctions on
bruised
his ass.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, if anyone can bend that rule, it's Israel. So I'm not so convinced that the US restraint is gonna work here, especially when the urges from the calls from US politicians, they've been very tepid, very mild, very look, we think you might be going a little bit too far.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby came out a few days ago and was like, the case by South Africa is meritless. Shut the fuck up, John. By the way, if the court rules against Israel on this, you're fucking complicit, fucking John. You're gonna be at the Hague.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. Let's keep moving. I guess let's
We have the
unless you have
great
some.
one. We have the
We
great
have
one, Luigi.
we have
There, pointing the divine finger, making
wanna be dictator.
only for a day, only for a day. I'm gonna build the wall in a day like Jesus
Gonna
did
be the
before
best
me.
day ever.
Ever. And what have we got? We've got the Iowa caucuses. And I mean, the only question right now, the caucuses are happening today. So
So
that,
wait, let me hype this up.
yeah,
This is the first instance of voting in the 2024 elections. The election
yes.
process has officially begun.
Right now, yes, people are voting in, I think, sub-zero, fucking beyond frozen temperatures, but they will brave the cold to vote for their little tin pot fascist dictator. Because if anyone deserves to sit on that fucking iron throne, it is this man. This man, this
The
beautiful man.
Iron Throne.
The iron fucking throne. It is the MAGA, the MAGA.
We made it a little great the first time.
I mean, I don't even, to be honest, I can't even be bothered to explain how caucuses work. Trump is going to win, people. The only suspensive question, or what is expected to be the coldest caucus night ever, will Trump exceed 50% of the vote, or will Nikki Haley, a former U.S. ambassador to the UN, eclipse the one time, he's become so fucking shoddy now. He's the one
One
time
time
rising
shooting
star.
star.
Ron DeSantis, governor,
Ron,
Florida King,
Florida King.
the
Exactly,
Florida
exactly.
King. We'll give you your dues, Ron. Don't worry. Don't worry. You humiliated yourself
Ron,
enough.
that shit don't fly in Florida.
Yeah.
DeSantis.
And it seems that he's going to get defeated by the great Bert Brain, was that the nickname? The great Nikki Haley, who is, Jesus
Who is
Christ, I mean,
surprisingly states-like. Like she's trying to portray this "I'm a serious politician" kind of vibe, at
yeah.
least in the last few debates, where
100%, but it
the
feels so
pastrami attacked
pointless,
her.
though.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it does feel so pointless, right? Because even if she manages to get second, even if she manages to win New Hampshire, which is the next state, where apparently she comes the closest to Trump, I still think Trump is gonna win it. I
by the
mean,
way, we have to stress this that Nikki Haley is where like, the corporate Republican donors sort of made their stand of,
yeah, they have, but I mean, she's not even that moderate in her opinions. It's not Trump, right? That's why they
yeah, anyone
fucking
but Trump.
start.
Like,
Yeah, they made their bet with Nikki.
let's try to throw money at anyone but Trump and see if it sticks. By the way, it didn't stick. Like Trump owns the Republican Party at this point. Well, we're gonna find out, obviously, very
Yeah,
shortly
but I
with
mean,
the
as we
votes.
said, I mean, he might even get more than 50% of the vote, which
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
basically full ownership at this point. Full
Full
voting
ownership.
rights, controlling interest.
I own it.
I am the party.
Did you
Exactly.
know that in China they only have one party?
They only need one.
Mm,
Exactly. My
exactly.
party.
We could do that here too. We'll see.
We it's the classic. We'll see. I love it. It's the classic Trump touch. It's that vein of comedy genius that he has. It has to be given
That,
to
yeah,
him.
honestly, Trump. Dude, look,
Funniest
Trump is a comic.
dictator ever. Funniest wannabe dictator ever. Not
Yeah.
even a dictator couldn't even pull that one off. So I mean, we've got the caucuses, the great caucuses.
So yeah, Trump is well on his way to winning the Republican nomination. That's not
Did you
even
see
up for
this?
debate. What's Bedlam? Bedlam
Yeah,
in the
you see that?
country.
He
Okay.
warned of bedlam. There's gonna be bedlam in the US if criminal cases deny him a return. That's not just
Bedlam is defined as a scene of uproar and confusion.
somebody explained it to him, obviously. But I mean, it's gonna be him versus Jack Barrick, any heart attack or whatever.
Okay, so we previewed in the last episode that, my view is Trump is gonna win, but like, so you did something very interesting in the last episode. You tried to describe Biden's path to victory. So Trump's path to victory is
Yeah,
a very low turnout rate. So if nobody wants to vote for Trump
exactly.
in,
Yeah.
in their right minds, and everybody is sick of Biden at this
But
point.
he's got a very solid minority group of fucking hardcore voters, Trump. So
Exactly.
if it stays low enough, and if all the young voters, the Hispanics, black voters as well, if they
Mm,
all stay at home, because they're not going to vote for Trump, obviously, but if they stay at
exactly.
home, Trump wins. And I mean, we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
the Trump voters are gonna go out to vote. So yeah, man, honestly,
And people get
Trump's
confused, Luigi, because he won so many states more Biden, but he won it by such small margins in
yeah
each
was very
swing
close,
state.
very close.
All of them were so close. Yeah.
Yeah, so Trump's way to victory is apathy, and I suspect we're gonna see a lot of that over the next year
Bedlam.
because
There's gonna be
yeah.
bedlam.
No, honestly, yeah, I think this is gonna be one of the lowest turnout elections in US history. Yeah, but because of the last time you got people out to vote with, oh my God, it's Trump, like we have to get him out.
They're gonna do
This
the
time,
rerun, as we said, but
yeah, but this time the message is not as strong because
will it be as effective?
the last 4 years haven't been great either. So people are like, yeah, okay, so we're gonna get another 4 years of this. Yeah,
40-year high inflation last year. That
mhm.
fucking counts for something,
That
yeah.
that doesn't win elections. It's as
Yeah,
simple as that
basically.
one.
So it's gonna be a
But
very tight and very fun election, people.
some good news on this front.
Mm.
Finally, wages in the US are rising faster than inflation. So we have a real income growth, as it were.
Good
People are
union
actually,
jobs.
yeah, no,
Good.
not really.
Oh, not really. No,
But
there's not many
he-
unions.
so that sounds great, right? So Biden is out saying, "Oh, real positive real income
I
growth."
don't
Or
know,
whatever.
Bidenomics.
Yeah. But that also rings hollow because yeah, it's true. When you take the inflation rate and you subtract it from the wage rate, suddenly it's positive. But the last 2 or 3 years
Yeah, but
haven't.
that's
And
such a small fucking, yeah.
and so if I took an income loss of like 5, 6, 8% last year, the last couple of years, and now my incomes are growing at 1%, I'm still angry.
Yeah, I think it's
So
not
yeah.
enough, as always with the fucking Democrats. It's not enough what you've done. You need to do more.
So it's a,
And I
it's a,
mean,
it's a
which
tough
is
one.
even funnier, right? Because we were discussing Europe. They don't even do that much at this point. What the fuck, right?
I mean, Europe is at this point the
Well, Europe
European
at this point,
political system.
exactly. You can tell the results of what they're doing is what Luigi is telling us. Yeah. I mean, the
So,
Germans are just about to elect fascists, by the way.
yeah, basically. So yeah, you can have many voices and many parties, but if the economic conditions are pretty bad, you're still gonna end up towards the fascists. Weird
You
how that
wanna,
works.
yeah. Fear, what was it? Yoda said something fear and then the dark
Do
side.
do
Do
or
or
do
do
not.
not, there is no try. Exactly. Should we finish up on the great Taiwan?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we had elections. Speaking of elections, yeah.
Wink, wink, China.
One party, the best party.
So they've elected the incumbent from the pro-sovereignty party, and the Democratic Progressive Party wins a president a third term in result likely to anger China. I mean, the other ones aren't 100% pro-China, but they're more pro-China than these guys.
Yeah, so we should note so that the party that was in power remained in power, but
The
after
incumbent, yeah.
under a new yeah. The point being, nothing is really gonna change. If anything, the political capital that the new government is working with is less than the previous government because their voting percentage, their like
Yeah.
their majority has gotten slimmer. So
Sorry, yeah, what you say? Yeah, the vice president has now been elected as president.
yeah, so new president, but same government essentially, but with a weaker mandate in a sense. And that might actually be positive for China, for Beijing, in the sense that they can't make any rash moves. In any case, status quo, nothing really changes, and it's a very tense situation because until very recently, China was violating Taiwanese airspace on a daily basis multiple times. Now, I should also note that Taiwan is very close to China. It's relatively easy for airspace to be violated, but when it's done with jet fighters, I think it's more about sending a message. It's not really, some lost passenger flight or something. So yeah, tensions will remain between the Taiwan and China, George. The US is in the middle of that, and Taiwan is a powerhouse economically speaking. I often joke about this, George, that think about Ukraine, right? And oil prices going up and that adding to all of the
And
inflation
grain
that we
prices, yeah, yeah.
that we experience now. And now think about Taiwan, right? Think about that moment in the pandemic where you couldn't buy computer components and graphics cards anymore, and the prices skyrocketed. Taiwan
Sky.
produces all of the graphics cards basically and all of the chips. So like it
Taiwan
would be
owns the gamers.
yeah, but what I'm trying to say is
It's
any
gonna be
invasion of
nuclear. It's gonna
Taiwan
be cataclysmic
it
for the
would be
world economy.
exported to the
Yeah.
rest of the world through very high inflation for computer components. Yeah,
Societies will start grinding to a halt because you can't manufacture, you can't have PCs anymore. And I mean,
so,
microchips go in everything in these days, every
mhm.
smart appliance, etc. So yeah,
So
obviously, it's
it's
gonna be
very it's
catastrophic.
very important for global stability that Taiwan remains uninterrupted.
I mean, for China as well has to be noted. It's
What
a
do you mean?
complex scenario. I mean, China doesn't want world supply to collapse either.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with the US already restricting what they can buy. So, by the way, we don't really talk about this, but like the big picture of that is we are in a new Cold War, right? Trump started it with trade
Yeah.
sanctions, with tariffs in 2016, 17, and Biden continued it with well, with on several fronts actually. Technology, the banning of advanced chip exports to China was one. Another one was cracking down on accounting practices used by Chinese companies that are listed on US exchanges, where they basically didn't follow US accounting rules. They basically told them they were going to delist them imminently. So it's heating up. It's heating up, George, and I think that's the big theme that's going to continue this decade, regardless of who's president or which party is in power and
Yeah, yeah,
whatever else.
definitely.
Yeah. So should we end on that?
Well, let's end on that. And I mean, let's end on we'll play the last few minutes of one of the prosecutor, one of the lawyers arguing for South Africa.
Okay.
So we'll
That's
end
it was
more
a
somberly
great
than
speech.
usual. Yeah. Yeah, it was a great speech. Yeah.
Yeah. So upon that sober note, let's make our goodbyes, good sir. See you next week.
Sayonara.
As underscored by United Nations chiefs, that failure has, I quote, repercussions not just for the people of Gaza, but for the generations to come who will never forget these over 90 days of hell and assaults on the most basic precepts of humanity. As stated by a United Nations spokesperson in Gaza last week, at the site of a hospital clearly marked with the symbol of the Red Crescent, where 5 Palestinians, including a 5-day-old baby, had just been killed. The world should be absolutely horrified. The world should be absolutely outraged. There is no safe space in Gaza, and the world should be ashamed. Madam President, members of the Court, in conclusion, I share with you 2 photographs. The first is of a whiteboard at a hospital in northern Gaza, one of the many Palestinian hospitals targeted, besieged and bombed by Israel over the course of the past 3 brutal months. The whiteboard is wiped clean of no longer possible surgical cases, leaving only a handwritten message by a Médecins Sans Frontières doctor which reads, "We did what we could. Remember us." The second photograph is of the same whiteboard after an Israeli strike on the hospital on the 21st of November that killed the author of the message, Dr. Mahmoud Abu Nujayla, along with 2 of his colleagues. Just over a month later, in a powerful sermon delivered from a church in Bethlehem on Christmas Day, the same day Israel had killed 250 Palestinians, including at least 86 people, many from the same family, massacred in a single strike on Maghazi refugee camp. Palestinian pastor Munzar Ishaq addressed his congregation and the world, and he said, and I quote, "Gaza as we know it no longer exists. This is an annihilation. This is a genocide. We will rise. We will stand up again from the midst of destruction, as we have always done as Palestinians, though this is by far maybe the biggest blow we have received." But he said, "No apologies will be accepted after the genocide. What has been done has been done. I want you to look in the mirror and ask, where was I when Gaza was going through a genocide?" South Africa is here, before this court, in the Peace Palace. It has done what it could. It is doing what it can by initiating these proceedings, by seeking interim measures against itself as well as against Israel. South Africa now respectfully and humbly calls on this honourable court to do what is in its power to do, to indicate the provisional measures that are so urgently required to prevent further irreparable harm to the Palestinian people in Gaza, whose hopes, including for their very survival, are now vested in this court.